All right, thank you, everyone. Let's continue on with the approval of the previous meeting minutes. I actually convert these automatically from Google Doc to Markdown. There's a tool that a plugin to Google Doc that allows me to do this. So all of this is verbatim from the Google Doc. So has everyone had a chance to kind of read through this? If not, go ahead and quickly read through that, and let's go ahead and approve these minutes, or if changes need to be made, we will make them.
I think we're good.
Any objection? I hear none. All right, minutes are approved. Let's go back to the agenda here. We have two proposals for task
You're on the
groups.
wrong agenda. This is
What's
April.
that?
This
Oh,
is
this is the
April
wrong,
25.
this is the wrong, yeah, wrong link, sorry. Right, we've got two proposals for task groups. We've got the Transparency Exchange API, and we have package URL. We've got Philippe here to represent package URL. So thanks for joining, Philippe. The task group for TG1 for the Transparency Exchange API, has everybody had a chance to go through this?
Yes.
Looks like Jan has.
What if you sort of briefly describe what's here, not like read the whole thing?
Yeah, the premise of what we're trying to do here is work on the last mile problem. This is really about sharing supply chain artifacts and, probably more importantly, supply chain intelligence. So this is really about how to automate and make it autonomous to discover and share things like S-bombs, H-bombs, etc., and automatically consume them. If I'm, for example, a large software company or large customer or whatever, and I've got 10,000 vendors in my organization that I do business with, I want to automate the discovery and the consumption of as much of that supply chain artifacts and intelligence as humanly possible. So that's really kind of the justification for the API to exist. This
That sounds good. Oh, sorry, you were going to say what the group does, what the relations between this the community is.
Yeah, I was going to go down that path. Is that what you were going to ask?
Sorry, that's what I was going to ask.
Okay,
I had the same question, since it says that it's shorter to develop. And I thought that the OWASP community group would develop.
That's correct, but I think there's a challenge in the fact that this is a brand new API. We have not had any prior art for this, and we do not currently have a process in place that would, kind of like TC39, for example, where every single contribution needs to go through essentially a royalty-free kind of sign off. We don't have that in TC54 today. So my thought is that the majority of the development for this API would actually occur in TC54.
Okay, that makes sense. But that's another discussion with Pearl then.
Yeah, I think Pearl's actually much easier because we actually have yeah, I think Pearl's easy. Yeah, we have the commit history. Yeah. There's a couple comments with with support here on access control. Implement robust access control mechanisms to manage the distribution of sensitive and restricted artifacts. I certainly do not want to reinvent the wheel here. This is really about just supporting access control. I don't know what that looks like yet. Oh, great. I've got an incoming call, but I can't change it because otherwise it'll cancel my Zoom meeting. Okay.
I think it's possible that we could address the comment here on this simply by changing some of the verbs.
Okay.
I think maybe just enable.
Enable instead of implement.
Yeah. Jan's
Yeah,
here, so
that's good.
could also say
That's
like, but yeah, I think it's more like we want to facilitate that capacity, but we don't necessarily want to build it out.
Exactly. No, that's
exactly.
a very good observation. Jan, are you okay with that?
Totally.
Sparkly heart.
This was exactly the thing I had a confusion about the support and at the same time the implementation. And I like
Right.
that much better because this is exactly what I love. Yeah.
Awesome. Fantastic.
Beautiful.
Well, that was easy.
I did have a
Is
quick
there?
question.
Yeah.
We still had like the question of implementation. When we talk about implementation, like what are we thinking the artifacts are?
In terms of like like the implementation of the API, I mean, it's just going to be a standard, right?
Okay, cool. That's
Yeah,
what I
but
figured, but since we had been talking about like kind of doing greenfield implementation in this, there's the question of whether or not we would be potentially writing any amount of code or like a JSON spec or something. But if it's just
okay.
standard, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just going to be a
PIN
standard.
spec has like 8 layers.
Right. I mean, I can tell you that, you know, my employer is going to be looking at this, you know, because Fortune 500s, the OWASP dependency track project is going to be looking at this because they've got tens of thousands of installations. So other folks are going to be looking at this. But yeah, I think, you know, we'll be creating a standard and everyone will need to interpret and implement that standard themselves, essentially.
I had a separate question, I guess, and no one has their hand up, which was, I definitely think that there will be a lot of companies that are interested in this, both from like Fortune 500, but also like the large collection of software supply chain kind of startups. Because I think this would be, I mean, I think this is a spot that people are recognizing could be important for making money potentially. One of the
Yep.
things that's always complicated with a standard, and I think it's something we should consider in this proposal, but doesn't necessarily change whether or not we accept it, is what will make it attractive to adopt the standard versus go around it or do something else. Especially because we're doing this greenfield, like I don't know if we've done any like community gathering around the desire for this to be standardized or for it to go kind of like Wild West ecosystem style. But that was something that came to mind when I was reading this.
Yeah, I mean that's a discussion we need to have in the working group. I think it's really important questions and also try to enable extensibility, but do it in a controlled way.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I've had a lot of private conversations with different folks, security, supply chain, suppliers, whatever. And while most of the conversations have been around transparency, like as in full transparency, what I'm actually finding is that the majority of both the vendors and the consumers actually don't want that. They actually want something in the middle. And this API actually allows, if we build it out correctly, this API has this capability called insights, for lack of a better word, that does provide the ability to have that limited or partial transparency use case. So
Yep.
I think being able to recognize that it's not either or, you're either transparent or you're not, I think reality is going to end up somewhere in the middle. And I think that, in my opinion, is going to be one of several different driving factors for the adoption of this specification.
We also have
But-
to remember that we're in very good time for the European Cyber Resilience Act, where parts of it is enabling transparency before purchase. So a limited amount of data should be available before purchase, but maybe some of the data should be behind authentication. But
Yes.
one of the documents in that regards is the Declaration of Conformance with the CRA, the CE mark. That's one of the documents I envision would be discoverable in here.
Yeah.
All right.
I'd also just call this out because I think it's an interesting analog to like what I think this is trying to achieve. But like when I was reading this, all I could think of was kind of what SafeBase is doing. I don't know if folks are familiar with them. But it might be valuable to reach out to folks that are kind of already moving early in this space to see how we can maybe get them on team standardization.
Yeah. I've got a meeting with
let's-
RSA's next week. I've got a meeting with one such company next week. So but yeah, there's others.
Yeah, but let's get them into the meetings so we can make sure that we have community buy-in on this.
Right. Okay, so do we have agreement that we will adopt this as kind of the charter for TG1 then? Is there any objection
Yes.
to that?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right,
It would
I hear
be
no-
good to have it a little bit more articulated. It doesn't have to be prior to adopting the charter, but the model for which things are being developed in this TG1 and which things are being developed at the community level, just figuring out the relationship between those.
Sure.
But I think we can feel that out over time as the group gets set up.
Valid point. Okay. All right, sounds good. With that, then let's move on to package URL. So thanks, Philippe, for joining. This is a really great question, actually, for Philippe. I had when I had drafted the initial charter here, I put the continued development and standardization of Perl. And I think Ole's comment was, does it actually need more development, or where does that development happen? Right, it's community. That's an excellent question. Philippe, do you have any opinions on that?
Can you repeat, please?
The first sentence here is the T. Actually, this should be TG2. This is a copy pasta. So TG2 is chartered with the continued development and standardization of Perl.
Yes.
Are we really doing continued development is kind of the question.
So the reason for this question is that the Ecma standardization within CycloneDX was originally thought of that the community does the cool stuff, and within the Ecma working groups we standardize, we do the boring, we do the reviews, quality control, and all of that.
If we, I'll let Philippe go.
Yeah, I'm fine as a way. I'm not sure the words here make much of a difference to me. I think there's a few potential interesting developments that need to take place in the spec. But the bulk of the work is going to be around, clarifying how we deal with the Perl for a given type and ecosystem, and providing examples, tests, and ways to implement the tools properly across the board. So I think the discussion basically is the question: does the discussion only happens in TC54 or elsewhere? It's going to be in both places, I hope, and going to continue definitely on wherever it is today. That makes sense?
Yeah, that's kind of what I envision as well. More of a community model, just like what we have for CycloneDX.
Mm-hmm.
If there are corner cases, I consider quality, right, part of the development process. But the Perl types, I think, are something that we'll need to kind of, I think the Perl types is something that the TG2 will need to kind of take up. How specifically they want to handle that, that's not part of the charter, but it is something that they need to kind of figure out.
Yeah, the balance there is going to be always between being reactive and being stable. I don't think it's a big problem per se, because we've always been both reactive and fairly stable, meaning having enough inertia in the process so we don't move too quickly.
I mean, if we find areas in Perl or in the API that needs a registry that is not included in standardization but managed by someone, is that something Ecma handles?
They don't have a registry today, if that's the question.
No.
Yeah,
Okay.
Ecma doesn't currently have examples of registries the way that IANA has registries, but we can definitely like work with Samina and Ecma management to figure out how to set that up if it's desired by the TG. So I think what we would need for Ecma is to learn what the requirements are. So for registry, I'm wondering about how we will do kind of governance and versioning or non-versioning, as well as kind of an understanding of which things are in scope. In previous TC54 meetings, there was interest in putting more things in scope of Perl than is currently there, like with some mapping of CPE into Perl, for example. And yeah. Samina, did you have something to say about this?
I was just going to say thank you. We have not done this in the past. We can certainly discuss it and see how we can support here. But this is something new for us.
So maybe this is a red herring, and if we have a process, which is the process we have today, where somebody can come with a suggestion of a type as a PR in the Perl types document, and then we come to an agreement and it's eventually merged, I guess maybe what we can have is a process whereby these community agreed upon types are then reviewed and made part of the standard. It's just that there's going to be maybe two tracks in the standards, one which is the base Perl specification, which is reasonably stable, and the other one which evolves at the pace of a couple changes per quarter or more. Eventually it will taper out, but where we have something which is a bit more dynamic in the types. And Chris and Ashley, please.
Yeah, Chris.
Speak.
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest that for the first scope sentence to that you could just remove the with you continue development, just say with the standardization of package URL. I don't think it takes anything away from the actual scope, and that is also in line with other task groups and technical committees within Ecma. So
it's all like that. It's chartered with the standardization of package URL, correct? Awesome. All right. Ashley.
Yeah, I was gonna say my suggestion actually kind of plays into to what Chris just said like quite nicely, which was it might be valuable to add under the program of work some amount of help establishing like a governance process for that future development for that group. So that there's like a little bit of structure there, because it sounds like maybe there's a desire for that and it doesn't currently exist. Apologies if it does. But that could be something to add there. So instead of owning it, like helping support the development of it might be nice.
Yeah, so like this sentence right here, this last one, implement an ongoing review process for new Perl type proposals. However, it doesn't mention anything about governance here. So is that kind of what you're getting at? I mean, it's one thing to have a process, but it's another thing to actually hold
Yeah,
yourself
my
accountable to it.
experience in open source, and there's obviously a million different ways to do this, is having a process is good, but also having a process for who is participating in that process can be very helpful. Kind of two sides of the same piece of paper there. And that's kind of what I mean by governance. Like you can have the process, but then you have to also kind of talk about like who are the people in the room doing that process.
I think the who and the what, in my opinion, is probably out of the scope for, you know, the charter itself. But I do think that we might want to consider adding governance to the program of work itself. And with that in their charter, then they can actually figure out the how.
That sounds great. I think that would
Okay.
fit with what I was trying to say, or is aligned with
Okay.
what I was trying to say.
Okay. Ian.
Yeah, I would just jump on to I totally agree with everything that Ashley was just saying. I think in a lot of these things, and I think again, you tell me if I'm wrong here. I think one of the goals here is to add a little bit of breadth to the help around Pearls, so that it's not just a small group of people who've been trying to actively do this along with all their other stuff. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Then is there maybe it already exists, but is there some evaluation that's well documented right now for new Perl type proposals? I'm assuming that doesn't really exist. It's more of a discussion around Perl types versus, okay, we'll make sure that this ecosystem has a way to compute a good, hash, and that becomes part of like a decision about Perl types.
It's more conversational today. Back and forth. There's not a lot of consistency. I personally have some ideas for how we could scale it better and make the Perl types machine readable, so that tools could actually understand a Perl type without having to hard code it. It would, I think, really help our test cases as well. But these are details that I think the TG kind of needs to figure out, in my opinion. Philippe, do you have any opinions on this?
No, not really.
So Steve, you think all of what you just said, that scope of work then would fall under this bullet point of implement ongoing review process for new Perl types? It's implementing the process and the criteria, right? But then you also mentioned kind of like an expansion and the kind of new capabilities. I don't see that listed here on this per se. Would we want to add a bullet point?
So I think we've got 2 bullet points. We've got one for I don't even have, well, one for governance, obviously. And excuse me, another for how would you summarize this? Scaling Perl type adoption? Is that kind of what we're getting at, or?
I think part of the problem here, as I wrote in the chat, is, oh, sorry, Daniel had, anyway, is that we need to be able to move Perl forward and extend it without having to revise the Ecma standard version. I think companies need to be able to say we support Perl 3, Perl 4. So the kind of auto discovery that you mentioned is interesting in that. or having a registry that could move faster than the standard document. So I kind of just brainstormed and said, well, we need to start defining a Perl core that doesn't move as quickly as the rest of Perl, or release. Yeah. Sorry, Daniel.
No, I'm glad you jumped in. I was going to go back to a different point. When we were talking about governance, we do have to keep ECMA rules in mind. So who can attend the meetings is definitely set by ECMA rules. That is, members and invited experts. This has an important, antitrust implications. So in particular, we're not being a cartel because we're open for people to join in a way that's well defined by our rules. Also about how we make decisions within the TG, within the TC is governed by rules about voting. But in practice, we don't vote. In practice, we have things decided by consensus. However, for certain big decisions like, do we want to approve the new release, we usually kind of theoretically do vote. Anyway, if we were to adopt more specific roles that are more kind of based on other criteria about what people can do, I think we should do that if it's appropriate. And we just have to consider how to if we need to propose a change in rules at the ECMA level, or if we need to carefully interpret that it is permitted. We just have to maintain this correspondence. Yep.
I'm not sure if that was related to my point about governance, but I guess I just wanted to clarify when I was discussing governance that potentially the governance that is shipped as part of this program of work is separate from pure ECMA governance. So I wasn't necessarily suggesting developing new governance structures within ECMA so much as giving governance structures to the Pearl project so that their facilitation, with ECMA potentially like improved to kind of like streamline that like design process.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was a miscommunication, but I wanted to make sure I was clarifying that because I do understand that ECMA has its own structures that exist for extremely good reasons.
Yeah, that sounds really good to me about having governance structures at the Perl open source project level that then feed into what gets proposed into Ecma TC54. And that corresponds really closely to what we have in CycloneDX.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And to your point, actually, I like governance to kick in when it starts to hurt a bit. So and now is the time. So
Yes.
I understand where you're coming from.
All right. I added 2 bullet points here. Do these capture what it is that we want? Again, I'm keeping the how out of this because that's a implementation detail.
I think my only comment here, and this could just be a naivete on my part, so excuse me that. Can we imagine that there will be anything beyond Perl types? Is like Perl types too narrow, I guess is my question.
No, I think that there is a Perl core that needs its own specification. It doesn't have so many moving parts.
Yeah, so the Perl core, so that will be like a formal ECMA standard, and ECMA has its own governance for that.
Yeah.
The Perl types, I personally don't think every single Perl type is going to be an ECMA standard. If it is, that's going to be a huge amount of work, but I'm kind of envisioning Perl types not being that. Therefore, we kind of have to have our own lighter weight type of governance because it's not necessarily going to be standardized to ECMA.
That's why I asked about registry or something that moves faster.
Right.
I fully agree with that, Steve. But I think we just have to leave that to the working group to figure out.
Yeah. Okay. Is there Daniel?
Want to mention that I think it will be beneficial to increase the rigor of the definition of the Perl types, whether that's through being an ECMA standard or not. One example of this is that in the JavaScript space, we don't really have a great definition of semver, semantic versioning, which is part of the NPM types. And this is something that actually there's some interest in standardizing in ECMA. Darcy Clark is interested in setting up something here, and it would be great if we could make sure that the efforts are sort of coordinated and aligned. If you're interested in participating in semver specification, then please get in touch with me. Also, the motivation for this is partly because there's a document out there that says this is a semver spec, and then it differs from how Node implements semver. So,
I would quickly just call out that I think there is a group of people who think they are that semver group, and I hope that everyone's collaborating. I'll take this out of this meeting, but I'll follow up with you on it, Daniel, because this is a long and storied thing with a long, there's a bunch of history with this.
Yeah, to be clear, nothing has started yet. Nobody has been left out of anything because literally nothing is happening right now. I mean, except for that other group. Nothing's happening.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm not like worried. I just want to let you know that there are efforts here.
That's great. Yeah, let's be in touch about that.
Awesome. All right. Is there any objections? If we can move this forward, is there any objections to this charter as it stands today in moving this forward?
My question is, what's the process for updating charters if we believe that we need to change something?
Daniel? Or Samina?
I was just going to say, when you, as a TC, you create your TGs. It is the prerogative of the TCs to define and do the work that you're currently doing. If you see in the future the need to expand this or to bring a further boundary conditions to it, it is up to the technical committee to discuss it and make that change. This is not set final, but it should be carefully discussed. Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you.
All right. So with that, is there any objections to adopting this charter as is and forming TG2 for Perl? This is an exciting moment. Not gonna lie.
We're very happy that we're forming a working group. Thank you.
Yay. All right.
It is also important that in your working group you do have a chair. So I hope that you will come to that conclusion soon.
Yeah. The chair and potentially the vice chair as well. They really do need to be ECMA members, so kind of keep that in mind. I would really like it if somebody else can chair these TGs. So I think that would be great. But when they convene, that will be one of the first orders of business for each of these TGs.
So I'd like to submit my candidacy for chair, but my org is not yet an ECMA member, so we're working on that. We'll be working on that with Samina separately. That would resolve that, and at least I can bring it up and you guys decide whether I'm worthy of that. But I need to go through this hurdle first.
It's not a hard hurdle, but Philippe will sort it out. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
So I'll be working on that on the side.
Fantastic. Well, you have my vote. All right. I don't know what the next.
Not started campaigning yet, but I will. So.
Okay. Don't complain. Don't campaign too hard. What is the next step? I guess this is a question for Ecma. What is the next step in actually forming these TGs, since this is the first time TC has done this?
So typically, we present this at the next meeting, but you may form this meeting, you may form these TGs. I would post it on our website. We would publicize that they exist, and it would be then announced also at the next General Assembly, which is in June, that you have moved forward in your when you do your chair's report. TGs are done through the committee. So, and this TG, as the TC is already a royalty-free, also is a royalty-free.
So, I mean, am I correct in understanding that these TGs are now formed? There's steps to document that publicly, but these TCs are convened. TGs are convened, right?
Yeah. So if you all agree as the committee, then these are committed. Then you have convened them. They will be minuted, and they will be noted. Yes.
We just need a few names then.
Correct. That's an important part. So we're 90% there,
So,
but I'm sure it'll be fine. Once Philippe and I have a conversation, we'll get this done.
All right. No, this is an exciting moment. So thank you everyone for chiming in and making these charters what they are today. We have 6 minutes left, and I think it's well, it's certainly not enough time to dive into the review of CycloneDX. So we might just skip that for next week and try to rush through that a little bit. We've last time we met, we stopped at the release notes. So we'll continue on next week reviewing the release notes part of CycloneDX 1.6. I also have an updated template that Samina provided that I was able to manipulate a little bit in a way where our automated generation of the docs are now using the Ecma template. So it's the next version. I'm going to try to post that later today. The next thing I published to TC54 will in fact be the exact same content. However, it's going to look very, very different because we're using the Ecma template. So I just wanted to kind of let everyone be aware of that. There are some other editorial changes, and I need to do this programmatically. One of the major changes is figuring out a way to limit the number of levels to 5 deep. There's many parts of CycloneDX where the headers go well beyond 5 levels, so I'll need to kind of figure that out as well. But I don't think these are really difficult challenges. I just need to figure them out. But anyway, I just want to let you know that the what I'll be posting today is the exact same content that we have been reviewing. It's formatted a little different, so it looks a little different.
Steve, also open a ticket in the bug tracker on the use of Ecma in examples is not okay. We have in IETF reserved a few domain names for documentation use. Example.com, example organ, etc. So that probably needs to be changed.
Yep. No, that was a good catch.
Existing version.
Yep. We have a branch for Cyclone 1.6. And then we have another branch for 1.6 that's I think it's Cyclone 1.6. It's 1.6-Ecma, I think is what it is. And that's where all of our documentation changes are going to be made. And then that will eventually be rolled out to master. And then when we start working on 1.7, then all those changes will be in 1.7 as well. So that's kind of how we're doing that at the community level.
The wonders of cherry picking.
Yes. Fantastic. All right, everyone, we've got 2 minutes left. I'll give you 2 minutes of your life back. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for your support in moving both of these TGs forward. This is an exciting moment. So with that, I'll let everyone go. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.